each military department and some defense agencies have a designated standardization executive responsible for assisting in the development and implementation of DSP policies and procedures. They also serve as a member of the Defense Standardization Council. Today, we will hear from the Army's Standardization Executive, Mr. Miles Miyamasu. Mr. Miyamasu is the U.S. Army Materiel Command's Office of the Deputy Chief of Staff, Operations G3, Principal Deputy. As the Deputy G3, Mr. Miyamasu is responsible for overseeing the requirements process for the command to include programming, operations, and analysis. In this role, he interacts with the enterprise of commands and agencies that make up the Army Materiel Command to ensure the needs of the Army's ability to provide sustainment, logistics, installation management, contracting support, organizational industrial base operations, and synchronized support to the joint force, and that they are developed, defended, and resourced. And he is the Army Standardization Executive. Next is Dr. Brett Seidle. Dr. Brett Seidle serves as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Defense for Research, Development, Test, and Engineering under the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition. Dr. Seidle is responsible for executive oversight of all matters related to RDT&E budget activities, science and engineering, advanced research and development, prototyping and experimentation, and test and evaluation. He is also responsible for oversight and stewardship of the Department of Navy Research and Development establishment, which includes the naval laboratories, warfare centers, and university-affiliated research centers. And of course, he's the Navy Standardization Executive. Next, Ms. Kristen Baldwin is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Science, Technology, and Engineering, Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force, Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics. Ms. Baldwin provides guidance, advocacy, and policy for the Air Force's annual $2.6 billion science and technology program and $1 billion developmental prototyping and experimentation program conducted at 40 research sites worldwide. She provides engineering and technical management direction on digital engineering, cyber resilient weapons, corrosion control, capability development planning, and the functional management of more than 14,000 military and civilian scientists and engineers. In addition, she is responsible for providing technical advice and counsel to the Air Force Acquisition Executive on a broad range of engineering and technical management areas. As part of this role, she oversees the Air Force's international science and technology outreach via various bilateral and multilateral engagement fora, including the NATO Science and Technology Organization and NATO Air Force Armaments Group. And she serves as the Air Force Standardization Executive. And joining Mr. Miyamasu online this morning is Ms. Edilia Correa, the DLA Standardization Executive. So today, they will be discussing standardization challenges and opportunities within their components and how they're leveraging technology through standards. Should you have any questions, please do so after the panelists provide their update. If you're in this room, use the microphones. And those of you who are participating virtually, put your questions in the chat, please. Yes,
I just have one quick question. Edilia, please turn off your camera at this time for Mr. Miyamasu. Thank you. And please also, if you have questions, use the Q&A function in the Zoom meeting link.
All right, thank you, Dave. And and when using the mics in the room, as I continually try to remind myself, I need to stay close to the mic, please. So with that, over to Mr. Miyamasu online.
Hey, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for inviting me to this great opportunity to actually collaborate and share information. Unfortunately, I can't share my video for some reason. I think I'm technology challenged, but in the maybe that's all safer for you all, and I'm protecting your eyes. But trust me, I am not in a sweatshirt and pajama pants. I'm actually in business clothes for this occasion. I just want to let you know that I just came on to the job about 3 months ago, and as far as standardization goes, I was familiar with it in my previous work. Some of it had to do with operations research, systems analysis, and then force management. So I was aware of the work, and I was probably a customer of the efforts that had been done previously. But now that I've actually come into the world as part of this effort, I can say that I'm a little bit thin on depth. I'll give you the best I can. I do have a friend for myself. His name is Ryan Mays. He's from Army Material Command. And for those of you old enough, he's my Encyclopedia Britannica of information, and I will probably reach out to him or if you guys have any questions. But again, thanks a lot for having me as part of this forum. There are a couple things that we have started to do this past year or so, to include the standardization projects that I list in the 37 offices that are working these things. And it's really including new documents, revisions to existing documents, and 5-year reviews and validations of existing documents, which I think is very similar to what all the other services do as well. I'm not sure if the value number of 700 is a big number or not, but I think it's been great effort and value added for both the Army and the Joint Force. Another good news story from my perspective is that in an effort to fill gaps, and I think these gaps may have been identified in the 2018-2019 timeframe, the Army stood up 2 new offices, both in ASALT, one in sustainment and one in the Office of the Chief Systems Engineer. And as far as sustainment goes, from a make or buy perspective, it helps us with analysis to make a decision on whether we're going to purchase equipment, parts, etc., from either our industrial base or go through the commercial vendors. And I think this ensures that our Army arsenals are considered as a component manufacturer, preserving critical manufacturing capabilities for our industrial base. And then as far as the Office of the Chief of Systems Engineer, it really serves as our module, as our lead for MOS and MOSA. I am still learning about both of those terms, but I find that these are very critical and necessary, and therefore value added for the Army and the Joint Force. So I'm glad we were able to stand up these offices and contribute from both the service perspective as well as a member of the Joint Force. If there's no questions, we can go to the next slide. So I think this organization or this project was actually recognized earlier this morning, and I just want to say thank you to them. I also want to thank you all for actually recognizing them and their efforts. You know, this kind of goes, I think this is a great example of how standardization and the processes that go to standardization in this case lead to soldier protection. And so it's really a good news story. I mean, you can look at the mathematics behind and the science of the expansion of thickness for the aluminum, but at the end of the day, if anything we can do provides more protection to service members that operate on the battlefield or wherever they are in the theater of war, I think that's always a successful endeavor by all. So thanks for the team for having done that, but also thanks for the organization here for actually recognizing their efforts. If we could go to the next slide, please. So from a ground vehicle system center perspective, we have done, and this is really about hazard abatement. And I think actually the next two are about hazard abatement. So hazardous materials such as cadmium and hex chrome have been used on fasteners and vehicle components for over 50 years as a corrosion inhibitor. The revised specifications enabled procurement of zinc nickel fasteners on the Army's current fleet of ground combat systems. There is a potential to save millions of sustainment and disposal costs, and we're test piloting this really right now on the M109 Paladin self-propelled howitzer system as our test platform. There's about approximately 800 fasteners on this vehicle, and depending upon our progress on this pilot, we look to do some future tests with other systems that are coming up for the Army, which is our armored multi-purpose vehicle, which is our replacement M113 armored personnel carrier, and then the mobile protected firepower system goes by many names. I guess the most common might be the light tank that will fight with our infantry brigade combat team formations globally. So another good news story, I think, trying to help the environment, but also I think in a way to also help us save on costs, both from usage and then disposal. So that's a good thing. And then for the CFA ISR Center and ARL, it's another, I would say, uh, hazard abatement effort, and it really eliminated toxic materials, very similar to what I mentioned earlier with cadmium and hexachrome, but also other lead pigments that impacted about 750 weapon systems across the Joint Force. And we identified other obsolete finishes and determined purposeful replacements for ground-based communications and radar equipment. Just some examples of the some of these 750 systems. For us, the Army, it was the CH-47 Chinook helicopter, and then there were, I think, a couple aircraft from both the Navy and the Air Force, and several ground systems from the Marine Corps. So in the end, again, another good effort to help protect the environment, protect soldiers, but also in a way get after saving costs, not only for the Army as a service, but also for the Joint Force and the department in general. And then finally, I'd like to just talk about our Logistics Data Analysis Center, and really in isolation right here, I'm talking about the SAE product support analysis. Now, this defines analysis activities for developing a design solution that maximizes supportability and minimizes total ownership costs. And examples of some of these analysis activities include the failure modes and effects and criticality analysis, maintenance task analysis, and both of these are used for determining spares and parts provisioning data. This kind of data help feeds our life cycle sustainment plan considerations, which we use for many things to include milestone decisions and procurement decisions. Major updates include analysis for the kinds of things like DevSecOps, additive manufacturing, in-service supportability, and failure reporting analysis and corrective action system. So our LDAC does quite a few things within this, I would say, the analysis world, but also in the standardization side of things. They are a key component not only of the Army Material Command in general, but really for the Army. And I know that they work tirelessly with other joint partners to ensure that their work as data entry and data managers for standardization efforts are correctly inputted into the respective systems that we use for repositories. So I really appreciate what LDAC does for not only the Army, but a huge contributor to the Joint Force and the standardization efforts. And then finally, if we go to the next slide, thank you. There are some challenges that we are facing, and again, I'll tell you that, again, having been in the job for 90 days, I am a consumer of the recommendation, but I think I've also actually seen this where from a full-time duty perspective, generally across organizations, just I would say related to the Army Material Command, that we do have folks that don't necessarily do this on a full-time basis per se, but it's really an additional duty or something that is things that they have to do in order to get their day job done, but it's not necessarily their daytime focus. So I think just from a continuity of effort, the ability to really identify the true workload requirements across the Army, it's a little bit harder for us to actually know that. I think that there's probably value for us as a service to actually look at that. Would be interested to hear or interact with the Navy, Air Force, and others to get ideas on approaches. But I think that there is a challenge for us in understanding what is the actual number, and if we could segment this capability into the Army as its own standalone capability, specifically at the organizational level. So that's something that we're looking at. I think it is a challenge. And then the next thing has to do with subscription services, primarily. We as a service, and we're not alone in this, have to go get our own. I think there's other ways inside the service that are approachable ways to kind of share to the extent that we can the subscriptions, but maybe there's an opportunity in the near future to see if there are uh, something akin to a global subscription that maybe can be purchased, and we are then allowed to be part of that. I'm not sure how that would work. I'm not sure at the level that would actually have to initiate and manage that, but there may be an opportunity uh, in a way to uh, pursue this. But I would tell you, just from an operational perspective, my view is that it's a way to common level set, give everyone the same common operating picture on information and usage of information and tools, so that we could all work, I think, more better, if that's a scientific term, across the respective communities to actually get work done. So um, I'll stop right there. I know, David, you mentioned a DLA representative. Edilia was on there. I don't know, Edilia, do you have anything that you would like to add from a DLA perspective, or David, do you want me to stop talking at this point? Over.
So,
We can hold Ms. Correa's comments till the end, and she has time allotted. So
Okay.
thank you, Mr. Miyamasu. So we'll hold questions to the end. So
All
next,
right. Thanks, David.
Dr. Seidle.
Thank you. I'm Brett Seidle. Can you guys hear me well? All right. So glad to be here today. I am a newly minted DASN RDT&E as well. That happened in June, so I beat Miles by 30 days. Um, excited to be here today. I also, found out 2 or 3 weeks ago that I was the Department of Navy's standardization executive. So the goodness in that is that this is the first speaking engagement that I've accepted since I took the role. Obviously, because of that, um, I don't know whether that's a good thing for you or not. Right, so we'll find out more as we go along. But I am happy to be here, and thanks for the invite. Since I'm new to this group, certainly want to learn a little bit about you, but just a bit about myself, and I'll make it quick. Um, I'm born and raised in Southern Indiana, 6'7", loved basketball. Basketball was king when I was growing up, and I wanted to be like Mike. Like Mike. If I could be like, you guys all remember that. I hope, if you're too young for that, that says something about me. But I wanted to be like Mike, but I couldn't really shoot like Mike, couldn't dribble like Mike, and most importantly, I couldn't jump like Mike. Mr. Jordan had like a 42-inch vertical. Old Brett had about a 2-inch vertical. And as a result, I took a different slant, became an electrical engineer. Not quite as exciting, but it's led me here today. I spent the first half of my career in the private sector, about 18 years with General Motors and Alcoa, and then 22 years ago, kind of moved back to Southern Indiana to get my kids close to their grandparents, and started working in the public sector within SWC Crane, one of our federal laboratories down there. I was there until about 2.5 years ago. I was asked to come to DC to become the Warfare Center Executive Director. Didn't really want to come to DC, but lots of pressure, some arm twisting, and ultimately Mr. Brett goes to Washington, and here I am. I showed up at the start of the pandemic. So the first year was all about the pandemic, and then a year later I got detailed down into CO4 as the executive director over the public and private shipyards. And then 2 months ago, here I am as DAS and RDT&E. I am all about the RDT&E enterprise. I've been all about standardization throughout my career. Obviously, a lot to learn about what this group does and the support that you provide. I tell people all the time, and this is not new, right? We're in a global power competition again, um, very similar to what I saw growing up as a child. When at that time on the international stage, it was Russia as our near peer adversary um, in the Cold War. Today it's China, but Russia still obviously meddling in world affairs with what's going on over in Ukraine. Um, and I think now more than ever, the way the U.S. projects power across the globe is with its blue water navy, and it's important that we do that and do that well, especially in times like we're in today. I think I've always felt that if we get drawn into another conflict, our success will be predicated on our technological advantage. And I believe that our technological advantage is underpinned by innovation and rapid adoption of technologies, and foundational to that is standardization. Right? So if you're in this room, you're in the right place to do good for the Navy, for sure. And that's how I feel about that. So really pleased to be here. We'll try to serve well going forward. Um, and if you go to the next slide, uh, here's what I'm going to talk about briefly today. Talk a little bit about how the Navy effectively implements standardization, followed by some of the challenges that we face. Going to give a shout out to that NavAir team again, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of our cross-SysCom efforts that you might see while you're here at the event, and then talk a little bit about our way forward. So next slide, um, how we implement standards in the Department of Navy. I can't believe I'm, first speaking engagement as a DAS and RDT, and I'm going to quote a SecNav instruction 4120.24. I'll remember that one now. That's going to be an important one for me, right? Um, but that policy signed out by RDA kind of lays out how we do standardization to have sustainable products for the warfighter. I think it's fair to say as the Navy and the DoD goes down these paths of digital engineering and digital transformation, um, the need for standards, whether you're talking about open architecture, hardware, software interfaces, interoperability, commonality, becomes very important, probably more important today than ever because it drives quality, it drives safety, it drives total ownership costs, it drives our ability to move quickly in the arena. Um, I do serve as a standardization executive, but Dr. Chris Dowd, who I'm looking at, raise your hand, Chris, recently appointed as our standardization officer. Let's give him a round of applause, right? He's newly minted as well with me, so we're both coming up to speed. He replaced Chris Paquette, has supported this program, both of them for some period of time. Chris has been in the role since 2010 and is retiring now, but I have a feeling he's not going far and may be back to help us again. But would like to say thanks to Mr. Paquette for his service over the last 12 years, and then certainly congratulations to Dr. Dowd. Um, I think in the Department of Navy standardization in large part driven across our SysComs with the chief engineers and their teams, as well as the folks that are sitting in here. Dr. Dowd serves to coordinate those efforts for my office. And suffice it to say that in those SysCom changs and those teams, that's where standardization work is really happening in the Department of Navy. Thank you. Some challenges, next slide, that we face today. Effective publication and availability of standards. Clearly, we need to be using electronic repositories to the maximum extent possible. The goal being for these to be easily accessible for our users and also our industry partners as appropriate. This really does remain an ongoing challenge because it's labor intensive and resource intensive for legacy systems that could last for decades. So it becomes an ongoing issue. Enabling new technology adoption with standards. I mentioned already that standards help drive rapid adoption. I think centralizing our ability to do validation and verification so that we can ensure suitability and applicability for the players that are coming into the arena for component development becomes very important. And I think in today's environment, as we continue to move down the path of digital engineering, where change and innovation is happening very rapidly right now, this is one of the most important challenges we work on. And certainly as we transition to that digital environment and we start dealing with master digital data, uh, 3D modeled metadata, configuration management of those things become increasingly important. And certainly how we share that with stakeholders and that changes are propagated and distributed well. Certainly those data sets are continuing to grow and become larger, and our digital environments may need to be upgraded. I think it's fair to say that our legacy systems are struggling with the sheer amount of data that they deal with, and that's going to continue to be a problem going forward. I think it's also an area where we lean into our industry partners because I think there's a lot of work going on in that arena that can, ultimately can help us if we're able to access that capability and move the ball forward. Um, when I think about our industry partners, the next bullet, data protection and intellectual property rights, become significantly important. That's been an issue for years and years and years. It continues to be. I think it's fair to say that we don't have a consistent methodology for how we handle that, certainly across the Department of the Navy. And I think it's something that we need to give a lot of thought to and approach and collaborative in our approach on that front. I think there's some win-wins there for all parties, and I don't think we've got to the answer on that front yet. And it continues to. There's kind of a natural tension that's occurring with us in industry that we need to come through on that front for that particular issue. Uh, Effective access, I'm going to skip the assist. We may come back to that later, but effective access to industry standards. I think there's a lot of national and international bodies who sell their licenses for these standards because it's how they fund their organization. And then we struggle as a Department of Navy to figure out how we're going to fund our employees so they have access to those standards so that we can drive that forward. That continues to be an issue. I think that's a leadership problem. But at the end of the day, it's an area where we need to drive some improvements. Ultimately, this gets to winning the global power competition. We've talked about the importance of standards for innovation and rapid adoption, but I think active participation in standards organizations like the one that we have here strengthens relationships, improves interoperability with our allies, with the broader world, with our customer sets, and all that's important for adding value while also maintaining competitive advantage. Next slide. All right, so this is the shout out to the Nav Air team. I was going to kind of keep this simple. I know they talked quite a bit about the work that you're doing there. Clearly, as I step over into the Pentagon as a DAS and RDT&E, I feel like all I've heard about is corrosion for the last few months. I mean, it is ubiquitous. It's a problem. I really appreciate the effort that this team has made on it. But more importantly, you guys got the $5,000 check. I was excited about that. I think I want to join your team. I can help next year, right? But congratulations. Round of applause to those guys as well and gals. Um, Frank Magnifico, Rade Sevilla, Rachel Cusick, Victor Rodriguez Santiago, Anna Safigan, and Nahid Ilyas. Really, efforts such as this kind of exemplify what we can do as a Department of Navy through standardization efforts. Really applaud the work that you do. So thank you for all of you for that effort. Next slide. Cross Syscom efforts. Listen, I want to, before I talk briefly to the slide, I just want to say as a individual now who's over this entire RDT&E enterprise, one of the things that I think about a lot is that we often operate as a holding company instead of an operating company. We work in our silos, and we do great work in those silos, but we don't always do great work cross Syscom. We don't always do a great job of collaborating with the other services. I think it's an incredibly important thing in every arena, not only the standardization arena. And so I'm excited to see some of the cross-syscom efforts that we have going on here in HSI, configuration management, additive manufacturing, and unmanned. I think you're going to get a chance over the next 2 days to hear some of that at the workshops. I'd encourage you to go see it. Specifically in the unmanned arena, it's an area where technology is moving very, very quickly, and the architectures and the standards become very important for us to both put out um, uh, and publish the right standards, and have our industry partners work to develop components independently that can then fit and work in our system. So encourage you to listen in and see what's going on with PEO USC and some of that work that they're doing in that arena. And then the last page, last slide, to continue to win, we do need to have relevant standards, know how to fill known gaps quickly. The standards need to be well organized, easily available. And in addition to having national, international industry standard bodies, when we decide to use those, we need to lead so that our employees in the naval workforce can have access to those standards when they need them. Serving the warfighter is what it's all about. To do that, we need the best systems that the public and private sector can bring together to produce and maintain, and certainly standards are an essential tool to making that happen. Um, and my get off the stage comment, I'm going to take just a little bit of liberty here. I rarely pass up an opportunity when I'm in front of a group of Navy and or DoD employees to talk about workplace environment and culture and and its impact on performance, whether it's in the standardization arena or wherever it's at. I just mentioned, and I know this audience doesn't know me at all, so know that this is coming from a good place and is in no way judgmental toward the Department of Defense. But I really do believe work environment drives great functionality and drives improvements in performance. I mentioned a minute ago, serving the warfighter was what it's all about. You know, you get head nods. Everybody says, "Yeah, that's great stuff." It resonates with us. Serving the warfighter makes sense, and yet at the local level, sometimes we forget on how to serve well in the area where we work every day, whether it's the partners that we're with, whether it's our peers, our employees, our supervisors. We often will forget to serve well. And I will tell you that I think we're built to serve, like really built to serve. I believe it's the best of us. I believe it brings real joy and happiness. Um, and if you think about, like, if I ask you all to bow your head, this is where you're thinking, hey, Brett, what's this got to do with standardization? I'll bring it back. Right? If I ask you all to bow your head, think about the last time you had really unbridled happiness or joy in your life. You'd probably tell me a story about doing something for someone. They didn't expect it. Maybe it was a family, friend. It was just somebody you worked with. Maybe they had sickness in the family, and you reached out and very magnanimously went and did something to help that person. You filled them up, and in doing so, you filled yourself up and you felt good about what you're doing. I'm telling you, those moments of joy are there for the taking every day, and they drive the work environment. It'll make where you work a better place to work. I'd like to think I'm all about that. I often talk about it all the time. But when I stop and take stock, like we can't get out of our own way. When I take stock of how much time I think about Brett's issues, Brett's problems, Brett's desires, Brett's goals, I'm not always pleased with what I see about myself. And I think we often, even in these arenas, we will step back and wait for somebody, some leader somewhere to solve our problems, whether it's standardization problems, uh, whether it's problems in the work environment. And I will tell you that starting tomorrow, we can all, in our own neck of the woods, go serve well and make a difference and drive performance, even in this standardization arena, in ways that we don't often think about. So I'd ask you to be all about that. I promise to try to serve well, and I hope you join me on that front. So with that, I'll stop. That's all I got.
Thank you, Dr. Seidle. Next, Ms. Baldwin.
Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to be back here. I'm not the new guy like my other panelists, my other two panelists. Which then it's wonderful to be able to be together in person. At least for as a hybrid conference. I hope the folks that are dialed in are having as good a time participating in this event. And it's great to see some of our former leaders and partners in the standardization program. And really, just a huge shout out 70 years anniversary of this really important and foundational activity of defense standardization. We'll talk a lot today amongst our service panelists and with our DLA partners, and you'll continue to talk this afternoon and tomorrow about the challenges. Many of us, some of us will think, well, that's not such new, something new. We've been struggling and struggling, but I think what's great is that we've got new partners, colleagues. I'm thrilled to be inspired by their new ideas, fresh look, and fresh emphasis for us all. So that about the importance of what we do here today and what the Defense Standardization Program does. I mean, it's not just rhetoric, right? It's not just we serve the warfighter better. We're going to save money. It's real, right? To the point where China a couple years ago built a major national level policy and plan on standardization. That and they published that, and they directed their citizens, industry, their government to drive towards that plan. And that's how important it is. Our pacing competitor, our peer challenger, China, felt that this was important enough that they actually marshaled a major national initiative for standards. And you know what? You can see it. So I'm sure you're going to hear from our partners in the commercial standards activities, the non-government standardization leaders, and they're going to talk about the population of other nations in our international standardization activities and how much it has the international partners have grown in their participation. And this is so I think 70-year anniversary is an opportunity for a real wake up call. Fresh look and fresh ideas is fantastic. It's not just rhetoric. It's important that we enforce standardization, that we continue to engage in the key areas where where our leadership demands. And I'll walk through a couple of those. Some have already been mentioned here by my panelists, and so I just think this is just a great opportunity for this conference. And with that, I will. Oh, maybe I just should also. I loved how Dr. Seidel, really recognized his team. I would not be here if it were not for the tremendous support that I get for our team and our field components in the Air Force and the Space Force. So I'm joined here today by Vanessa Costa Felix. I'm joined online by Amy Mercado, who is our leads our standardization modernization office for the Air Force for our Air Force Materiel Command, and her staff is here with us today as well. And then I don't know if our Space Systems Command, our United States Space Force lead is joined us because it's 3 hours earlier there. Oh, they should be up by now. But my thanks to Franco Macchia, I was just so pleased. We're going to start. We had sort of a reconvening of our standardization activity across the Department of the Air Force recently, and it was just so thrilling and to be able to see such a strong community across our two services now, and so I'm thrilled to be here to be able to shout out some of the important and strong things that they're doing and the ways in which we're partnering together with you all. So with that, I'll take the next slide. My conversation with you for the rest of my remarks will touch on kind of our areas of interest, if you will, non-government standardization activities, our participation in in these critical areas with our non-government partners and the external standardization community in our specialty areas. And then we'll also touch on, making sure that we're making available the standards that we have developed and that we need to implement, and also keeping them fresh. So, overage standards has been an important topic for many years now, and so I'll make some comments in those regards. May I have the next chart too? With respect to that first area of interest, non-government standards, the Department of the Air Force, I can assure you, has implemented the DoD, well, the statutory requirement that we implement. We seek non-government standards over military unique standards to the greatest extent possible, and we have implemented that statute, that DoD policy, down into our Air Force, our Department of Air Force instructions, and throughout the standardization community in the Air Force, the leadership, whether it be through the engineering chain of command or through our technology, our science and technology chain of command, our maintenance chains of command, and other partners, that we encourage our personnel to participate in these non-government standardization activities, because that is the default. We need to embrace and encourage and seek to develop standards in key technical areas where we need them, rather than develop them ourselves. We took a survey we try to keep tabs on our numbers of subject matter experts that are involved in all of these types of standardization activities. We've got, at a recent count, over 170 individuals who are actively engaged, and strong representation. And we seek to make sure that, not only are we monitoring and participating, but in cases where it really matters and where we can apply the resources, we want to be voting members and influencers. Um, and as well as leaders in subcommittee areas. Um, so our people are well engaged, and I did hear the Army's comment, which we resonate with. Our challenge is to make sure that chains of command understand the value that engagement is providing, the benefit that these foundational activities are providing. And so it's leaders like us, and it's partnerships with this community to help raise the visibility. So I encourage broadly to shout out about this 70th anniversary and all the great things that you've achieved. The awards program is fantastic at helping that recognition, and we'll do our part to continue to raise the visibility. And that's my commitment as I have joined the Department of the Air Force. Let me have the next 2 or 3 slides. I'm going to talk about some specialty engineering areas. MOSA, modular open system architecture, has been a really important topic for a number of years, and I think we've sort of reached as I had transitioned from the Office of the Secretary of Defense activity and into a component in working directly with the Air Force and the Space Force. I'm so pleased to see that we really are taking this seriously. We really are making, tremendous strides. We have significant funding actually going towards the development of open system architectures. We have an office of our architecture. We have an open architecture management office that has a dedicated program element line that engages and matures and manages a set of standards that largely are focused on a government kind of avionics architecture. But just in addition to that, we've got a weapons open systems architecture that's well maintained and managed. And I'm going to talk to you about the emerging Space Force Space Systems Command interest in developing and maturing their open systems architectures to make sure that we, as we capitalize on the commercial advances in space technology, we're doing so in a open systems mindset. um, Let me touch back on our government, reference architectures. So we have open standards, open systems architectures, but as we apply them in our key functional areas, whether it be key capability areas, whether they be avionics systems or space systems or weapon systems, like I mentioned, these government reference architectures really help enable those individual unique standards in areas like whether it be precision navigation timing standards or communication standards, electronic warfare standards, different payloads that are going to operate and be integrated with our systems. These government reference architectures help us to link together, maybe like Lego blocks, but really piece together these different key interfaces and help us manage them and maintain them and communicate them to industry to design to. So that's the key. And so, what I'm pleased to tell you here is that I think the Department of the Air Force is making some significant emphasis requirements for compliance with these emerging government reference architectures. There's still a lot to be done. And so what we've got to do is keep the heat on, help our industrial base, our capability development suppliers and designers and providers in the defense industry understand that we're serious about this. This is and that we have expectations of being able to comply with open systems, modular open systems architectures, and these government reference architectures that we're developing. I have, I think, on the next slide, just a visual of what I started to talk about with our Space Force, our Space Systems Command. Um, I was pleased to hear that Space Systems Command is really interested in reaching out and identifying a non-government standards organization to help partner with and establish a government and industry and standards alliance that we can actually again manage and fund and kind of and seek as a sort of a consortium alliance across public and private partnerships. So this is a new activity that they're going to continue to push forward. I'm thrilled to see that, and you can just see as an example of the space systems of systems architecture. We of course have our satellite vehicles, our space vehicles, whether they be, and there's multiple vehicles that are interchanging and exchanging data and communications in space. Government vehicles, commercial vehicles that have hosted government payloads, and government to just commercial vehicles. We're seeing this play out in real time in some of our engagements overseas, and how that new interoperable alliance is so critical across commercial and government technologies, and how we can really benefit. And we benefit by being able to have these common interfaces and ability to partner. And standards is the root of that. And so you've got satellite to satellite cross links, and then you've got, of course, the exchange with our launch vehicles. So we want to be able to continue to not only use government launch vehicles, but of course transition to commercial launch vehicles and commercial buses that can put our payloads, our equipment, our capabilities into space. It's much more affordable, economical, and it's an opportunity to increase our technology that's being developed in the commercial sector, and so that we can leverage and take advantage of that. So you've got space vehicles, launch vehicles, and then of course our ground control systems. And so Space Systems Command is looking to make sure that we're understanding and developing reference architectures with commercial industry that can identify and upgrade and improve these interfaces across this space systems to systems architecture. Let me go to the next slide. Some more areas of specialty engineering standards that I know you've got on your agenda these 2 to 3 days, and that are also important to us. First point I'd make is that the efforts across our community that in these key areas, whether it be digital engineering that was mentioned, or modular open systems architecture, or I know human systems integration is going to be talked about here as well at this event. These working groups, these government working groups, are very important. We continue to prioritize our participation in them. Very successful, because it's not enough just for things that each of us are talking individually at the Navy or the Army or Air Force and Space Force. That we actually can develop these all of our capabilities work together in theater as joint mission operations, and so we really do. I want to give a shout out to the individuals that participate on these working groups, um, because it's so critical that we make these advances together. And then just a kind of a mention of some other key topics of interest. I think Dr. Hundy may have mentioned many of these critical technology areas, things like microelectronics and directed energy. These are all have really important standardization activities, and where the Department of the Air Force is engaged. And when you look at our list of critical technology areas, there really are. Um, a large amount of them. I think at last count there may have been, like, let's call it 14 critical technology areas, and about 11 of them are really underpinned by commercial, or kind of led by the commercial industry. And so this whole looking at how do we use standards, and common language, common data exchange. I think Dr. Seidle mentioned data as well. Are so important here, to in areas of these critical technologies, so that our capabilities can leverage these commercial advancements. And then finally, we are I mentioned here on the slide our chief architect office. So the Department of the Air Force has a Air Force chief architect, and one of the things that they've been doing is not only promoting standards, but we're working to develop a joint repository for references, standards, and other guidance. I would just promote that, and this is, I think, one of my closing points, is I really want to continue to work with the Defense Standardization Program, the ASSIST database, to make sure that we're as linked as possible with the activities and the repositories across the services. One more slide on our overage activities. I mentioned our Standardization Management Office, and Ms. Mercado, her efforts there that cross the Air Force. The Standards Office oversees over 8,700 documents, and the subject matter experts that are aligned with those. Um, you know, it's critical to make sure that we're keeping that as people may retire, move on. We want to make sure that we've got the right expertise, kind of to backfill as our people continue to move, which is a great thing for everybody's career path. And it's a great thing to broaden the experience and engagement with standardization. And so this Standardization Management Office is key in making sure that we've got the right technical subject matter experts available, that they're keeping and that we do a call, so that we're keeping track of making sure that we're keeping the documents up to date. we're putting them in some sort of status if they're not currently up to date, so that we don't have misuse and we don't have a concern about those standards. And keeping track of all of these, I think, of the preparing activity documentation of over 1,000 documents, we've got only 101 that are in overage status right now. So kudos to the team for continuing to do a great job in this area, making sure that our standards are up to date, and reflecting latest technologies and status of the as they mature. And then I think I've just got my final summary slide. I just want to reflect that I say here the Department of the Air Force standardization program is vibrant. I think the whole defense standardization program is vibrant. I think you are celebrating a wonderful anniversary here today with this conference, and I'm really glad that you have maintained this annual event. Our commitment in the Department of the Air Force is to continue to try to increase our subject matter expert engagement, prioritize where we've got to, put the most resources to get the most benefit, to deliver our capabilities and get the benefit of standardization, whether it be interoperability, closing a mission thread, or being able to ingest commercial technology, all of which I've tried to touch on as I've made my initial remarks. We want to continue to advance key specialty engineering standards, and we want to continue to improve our access to standards, whether it be through licenses or through the ASSIST database or through these other repositories. We got to keep making sure that we're providing our engineers, our technical community, and our standards users with the most up-to-date information in the most user-friendly way that we possibly can. And at the bottom of my slide are my POCs that I've mentioned already, and I look forward to any of your questions as we may have time. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Baldwin. Ms. Correa, online.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Ms. Correa, we can barely hear you.
Barely hear me? Okay.
That's a little bit better.
How about that better?
There we go.
Okay, so I think I'm just going to stick to the audio because I'm having to come very, very close to my screen. So you're going to get a 10 size face, 10 times the size of my face. So I'll just stay on audio if that's okay with you all. I wanted to thank you for inviting DLA to this panel. Being last is a little tough and a little easy at the same time. A little tough because great points have already been made, but it's easy because I can definitely reinforce a lot of the comments from the executives before me. So I will like to kind of give you the DLA perspective of the challenges and opportunities in the standardization world and some of the things that are of interest to DLA. So definitely I agree with Miles on the challenges that the Army is experiencing, optimizing resources for standardization. We never see the engineers and the experts, working away every day on the standards or specifications that they've been assigned. And we unfortunately also don't see that it's a mature workforce, very knowledgeable, but that we don't necessarily have, I think, the best optimized plan to ensure that technical strength is continuous. I know in DLA that's a challenge for us, not just so much what I consider to be a relatively low amount of folks dedicated to specs and standards, but I don't really see a very dynamic approach to ensuring that population of experts remains strong. So that is one of my challenges. And as one of my bosses would say, nothing is a challenge but an opportunity. I guess one of the things that we want to do as we have new support and leadership here in headquarters with my new standardization officer is to assess indeed what are some of the gaps or needs that our major subordinate commands may have to ensure that we have a strong population of experts that can still hold the reins on standards and specifications. The subscriptions approach is also a challenge for us on a corporate level, and that is something that we're also looking into. I don't know if the Defense Standardization Office could assist us. As Ms. Baldwin said, we need some fresh ideas. Perhaps what we need to do as standardization executives across the department is try to leverage the resources that we may have monetarily to have individuals join committees. Perhaps we can leverage our resources or think of new type of subscriptions so that we can indeed have government presence in the commercial standard bodies. It's very important for the department to have that presence and have that voting power, because there are some limitations that we face, particularly in our legacy systems, that may not be visible to modern industry, as definitely they have a more flexibility to look forward and make a greater leaps than we do in the government when we are still maintaining 40, 50-year-old weapon systems. So we have unique challenges and unique requirements that truly must be voiced in those standard bodies. Another aspect of interest, I think also opportunity for DLA, and I'm sure our colleagues in the services, is the focus of the department and of industry on digital enterprise, digital thread, digital engineering, digital manufacturing. I am going to start coining the phrase in my agency, digital logistics, so that everybody understands that we can all indeed be connected up and down the supply chain, from the moment of an item to a performance requirement being established in a weapon system, to the design and the building, fielding, and sustainment of that weapon system. So this is a great opportunity for all of us to be more effective in how we work. In the sustainment world, we experience those advances after the front end, the major acquisition programs have taken the advantage of those new capabilities. But one advanced manufacturing capability that is giving us a lot of opportunity, even in sustainment, is of course additive manufacturing. And we've seen a lot of work from R&E on working with innovation centers like America Makes to take a leading stand on promoting and consolidating commercial standards so that we can all accelerate the use of additive manufacturing. One benefit that the services have been able to apply as each of them pursues their capabilities for additive is that they're able to generate their own service-specific specifications. For DLA, it becomes a challenge, and we have in place through R&D initiatives a program called JAMA, Joint Additive Manufacturing Acceptance, that brings the military services together and allows us all to contrast and compare either commercial standards or government standards or unique mil service standards, so that we can identify common ground in key areas such as additive manufacturing candidate identification, actual design, what a design for AM should look like, and manufacturing and acceptance for AM through testing. So we're able to see that common ground. And what we would like to do as DLA supports services that use common items is determine what are the implementation paths for what we see as joint approaches to the use of AM. So it can provide us launching points to either new commercial standards or new government standards. But the point is the key word standards, so that then supporting agencies such as DLA can support multiple customers and scale up those AM capabilities through the commercial sector. So we're seeing with advanced manufacturing capabilities, particularly AM, how that does provide an opportunity for standardization. And indeed, to be able to engage the commercial sector, we must have commercial standards. And not just to have the big companies that are always there for the DoD, but our middle size and our small companies as entrepreneurs that are eager to do work with the government and offer their expertise. And those commercial standards are their stepping stones to becoming partners. Another area of opportunity for us will be how to work efficiently in the DoD 508 compliance mandates. We know that the standardization process is work intensive, is a lot of analysis and review and engineering methodologies that have to be understood, vetted, validated. And so we have a lot of work, a lot of documented work that will eventually need to be transitioned to be 508 compliance. I don't know where the services or the standardization office may stand in those initiatives. We in DLA would be eager to see how you may be tackling those challenges. Another thing with regards to the engineering working groups that we've seen for the different aspects of the digital enterprise is that they themselves have been able to come together and document a lot of the business practices, again, perhaps not through a commercial standard, but through the issuance. I believe there's going to be an AM guidebook that is going to be released by the ManTech community. And also there's a digital engineering handbook. So we're seeing a lot of best practices captured through handbook and guidebooks media, which is very helpful and I would think would ultimately result in incorporation into commercial standards. So I have a couple of final comments, and one is also with regards to the modernization of all our IT systems across the department. And I do believe ASSIST is also going through a modernization. So a question I would pose for perhaps an answer from the Defense Standardization Office later would be to find out, and I'm sorry I missed the session yesterday, probably my question was answered yesterday, where the office is with regards to consolidating requirements for modernizing ASSIST and how end users might be of help to provide some ideas or suggestions for new capabilities in ASSIST. And then lastly, I want to thank the military services for their continued effort in the generation of specifications and standards, because it makes our job in DLA so much easier to be able to support all of you and have the most responsive supply chain we can as we continue to focus on commercial standards. And that's all I have. Thank you.
So I'll start with a question on critical and emerging technologies. We did hear Dr. Honey remark on critical emerging technologies, work with microelectronics, JADC2 he mentioned, as well as ANSI-led workshops on microelectronics, and there's also been workshops in additive manufacturing regarding standards. What more can the DoD be doing to remove barriers and encourage participation by both public and private sector while we still have the opportunity to contribute to standards for critical and emerging technologies. And I put that question in the context of we're seeing standards being developed much earlier in a technology's life cycle at earlier TRLs. So is there anything more that we can be doing to encourage participation?
I can just, this is Kristen, I can just take a quick uh, couple remarks on this. I see kind of two sides to this. We want to be leaders. I mentioned before, China's standardization plan and their strategy and their population of our standardization community development activities. And so there's one thing is that for the critical technology areas, I think that Dr. Honey mentioned and that are mentioned really in our national defense strategy, we want to maintain leading edge. We want to be kind of the US wants to be the world class leaders in driving those. And so I think it's important to try to recognize those as priority areas for our defense standardization community. And that's kind of one half of the technology, the critical technology solution. The other is how do we actually get those critical technologies into our systems, our legacy systems, our modernization activities, right? And that is on the other side of more how to, kind of falls in those areas of those specialty engineering and modular open systems, interfaces and interoperability, all the features and attributes that standardization delivers. So I think that we also need to be, and I will tell you, I know all the services in R&E have a keen focus on tech transition. So I think an important messaging for the defense standardization community is that you are an enabler. We are an enabler of tech transition to be able to incorporate emerging technologies into our warfighting capabilities, into our operational capabilities. So we want to get on the tech transition wave, if you will. We want to get on that bandwagon, and you need to shout out about how critical and foundational standardization is to really achieving tech transition. You'll hear a lot of our leadership talking about how critical it is. Uh, and I think that there's a real opportunity to get the standardization community hook in there.
So I'll just add, the prioritization piece of that really resonates with me. I do believe there's critical technologies that we're all about as a defense sector, and certainly in the Navy. And I think um, we will be somewhat resource constrained to say we're going to be all things to all people in the standardization environment. For the things that are most critical to our systems, we need to be leading on those fronts. I think there's also the pace of technology change right now from a digital engineering perspective in some of those environments like microelectronics. It makes it very difficult at times to stay in front of it, and so we start to develop standards earlier and earlier, and then as we're maturing that technology, it needs to change. I think that drives us to trying to have really strong, what I kind of term innovation ecosystems, uh, connectivity, and really connective tissue with the industry partners that we have, academia, the folks that play in this arena, the standards bodies. Uh, those ties and connections have to be strong in the areas where we have these critical technologies, so that we can adjust as the technology matures and things change. Because I see us trying to be about it, but we're about it early in the process, and then it leads to some other issues later on. And I think that connective tissue is important. Over.
Hey, this is Miles Miyamasu. So that's a great question. I think there is a piece of it from a service perspective, at least from the Army, where we also have to inculcate that desire more. It's almost like a ground up kind of perspective. And I know our ASALT is trying to or is considering mandating to our PMs that they include a standards compendium listing in pre-RFP packages. I mean, I think the thing may help towards at least building the groundswell of desire to pursue these things. You know, I think there are always efforts from a direction of the department where organizations at the higher level or at the coordinating level could help maybe steer in the directions. But, you know, I think there's also inside, at least from the Army perspective, that we have to continue to grow that kind of perspective. And so being somewhat of a rookie on this, but to Dr. Seidle's point, one of the things that I've always thought about, but I'm not sure, is that there are probably standards that are enduring, and then there are probably standards that are non-enduring. And what I mean by that is that there almost may be a perspective where enduring standards are something that gets codified and they have a shelf life of longer than whatever X number of years, 3, 5, whatever the right number is. But because of the pace of technology and new developmental capabilities that are being created, there might be consideration for a few of non-enduring standards that have to be re-adjudicated on a more frequent basis. Now, having said that, I think I just said, well, hey, maybe we have to do more work, but I'm not saying that that's necessarily what we would have to do, but from a perspective of as new things are being developed, because the pace of technology is going faster, very smart people are coming up with new and innovative ways to get after problem sets. Maybe there is some value on parsing standards from that perspective over.
Thank you for that insight. And that's something that I think we've thought about, on-ramping opportunities for new technologies, and how do we take some of the work that is being done in R&D and ensuring that that is being fed into standards development activities. So thank you. Do we have any questions from the room or online? Okay.
This question is for Dr. Seidle. How is standardization between the Navy and Marine Corps handled? And how can the Marine Corps interface with the Department of Navy's standardization activities and capabilities? How can the Marine Corps interface with the Department of Navy's standardization activities and capabilities?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I find the Navy and Marine Corps interaction always interesting. Is the first thing that I would say to that. We don't always collaborate in the ways that we need to at times from a naval perspective when we're dealing between the Navy and the Marine Corps. I don't know the strength of that connection in this defense standards, in this program that you guys have. So I'm left a little wanting on the question because I just don't know the level of engagement with the DSP from a Marine Corps perspective. I always find that the Marines very quickly align to strategy and direction. When the commandant says, let's go this direction, the Marines align and go forward and go forth. And sometimes in the Navy, we will talk about it a little bit more than maybe the Marines will. But fundamentally, we all play on the same team. We all work in the same environment, and I just feel like there's got to be better integration at all times when we're dealing with things naval, and I think we should drive that the same way that we drive cross services and cross syscom approaches in this particular arena. We typically use similar systems. We use similar fundamental technology for the things that we're doing. I think we're playing in that same arena. I don't always think we talk as much as we should on that front, so there's work to be done there. Over. Go
Uh,
ahead.
Yes, we have a quarterly DSP uh, meeting. Yeah, so Win Shirai, I'm the NAVC standardization officer, and I participate with the NAVC folks in a quarterly meeting that includes the Marine Corps. So at a high level, we talk to them at least quarterly on big issue topics. I am not aware on a day-to-day basis, however, if there is correspondence between Navy and Marine Corps. Elaine here, who is our you know program manager for Peraton, does have a contract with the Marine Corps.
Yeah, and so the Marine Corps, we do support the Marine Corps Standardization Officer, the counterpart to Wincherai at NAVC, and their document work is, for the most part, it's oriented towards like uniforms and such. The Marine Corps, they like to look nice in Marine Corps uniforms and other things associated with the uniforms. So we do support their activity, their standardization management activity, um, and helping them manage and maintain their standardization documents, update them, make sure they address their overage documents and that sort of thing. But as Wynn said, they do participate with these during the quarterly Navy standardization meetings, and participate just like the rest of us do, but they don't have as many documents as, let's say, NAVC does or NAVAIR, some of the Air Force and other counterparts. But from that very limited perspective, they are definitely a player in the defense standardization program, and have responsibilities, and they take them seriously, and they've got their documents that you can go into assist and see that they are maintaining and developing new ones as well. I hope that answers the question.
No,
I'm
outstanding.
not sure it did.
No, outstanding. Appreciate
Okay.
the assist. Yep.
You have another one online?
This is a good one. What are the best methods for industry to engage with the Department of Defense on standards development, both non-government standards and DoD standards?
So can you read the first part of the question? Was it just what is the best way?
What are the best methods for industry to engage with the DoD on standards development
For industry to engage?
with DoD?
So I'll start by saying that when the DoD is developing a standard or specification, it's per our policy, we have gone to commercial standardization bodies, or sorry, should not use that term, non-government standardization bodies, or what public law calls voluntary consensus standards bodies, and exhausted those resources before we have come to the conclusion that a DoD unique standard is needed. Oftentimes, the DoD will then engage with standards development organizations and industry that have the technical expertise in that area and share some of the draft standards and gather their input. That happened, and I think it was the Army briefing this morning mentioned coordination with SAE. If it didn't, I know that it occurs particularly within SAE, but many other standards development organizations. So the DoD standards are addressing DoD requirements, and it sounds maybe harsh, but we will reach out to industry where technical expertise is needed. I don't know if that addresses the question. Is there a follow on? Okay, go ahead. Please go ahead and next.
From your perspective, what is the best way to communicate not only that the standard has changed, but also how it has changed and if it will cause an acquisition change? And that is from the service to the program level. Let me read it again.
Well, I think I would just start by saying, and then ask the panelists to pile on. When as we update standards, we are issuing those updates, but as we make those updates, we need to be considerate of the impacts that they're going to have, what the changes are, and so typically there's a timeline, a grandfathering, if you will, that can occur. Another thing that drives the update of the standard and the implementation of that update and the consideration of the impacts are, a lot of our standards are placed on contract, right? And so they wouldn't be effective until the next contractual update. And that contractual update process would have a negotiation opportunity to really understand the changes and the risks. So I believe that that's probably the best way, the most business sense way to achieve that uh, those considerations. Thank you.
So at a higher level within the DSPO or the DSP tools and resources available, um, Assist, of course, is where standards are published. There are prescribed templates for the documents, some MIL standards, MIL specs that include a place for updating, noting changes. And so I know in some documents that's maybe used to a greater extent than others. And I've seen the same in standards development organizations where some standards, and it's not even organization to organization, but even between technical committees, some do a better job of annotating where changes have occurred within the document. So at a document level, I guess that would be my answer. And I think there's another aspect that you addressed with regarding how is that then flowed down through to programs. But any of the other executives on that comment?
Excuse me, this is, Elaine Sullivan again from Paraton. And I support NAVC standardization SMA as well as the Marine Corps SMA, as I mentioned. And when we prepare the changes to the standardization documents, we are required to include a track change version of the document. We're doing it in Word right now. That's not to say that's the way it's always going to be, but that's the way we're doing it, such that you can see the changes from the current version to the proposed version, and then the justifications for changes. We're maintaining that throughout the process of updating that particular revision or amendment or change, whatever it is, and in keeping that as a part of the record keeping requirements that the government has to ensure that we have that traceability of requirement of all the requirements in the documents throughout that revision process through up to approval to go to publication in DoD Assist. So I don't know if that gives you a little bit more insight as to how NAVC and the Marine Corps are handling their documents. But that is the way we're doing it, and it ensures then that when we provide the document to, let's say, the shipyards, they can see. We will give them a track change version. They can see what the changes were, so they understand what the new contractual requirements are going to be if it's invoked in a contract, if they want to, or if they can. Um, um, use that document in its newer form. So I think I've explained it well enough, Bob.
Yeah, I mean, at NAVC, I mean, we keep the shipyards involved with our process to review the document. So we get their input as part of that review process. And then when the document is finally published and issued, um, we give them that red line strikeout version so that they can see what the actual changes are, decide whether or not they want to move on to the newer version as part of their contract. But it's like you said, that a contract gets to use whatever version was called out in the contract. Is their choice whether or not to move up to a newer one.
No, thank you for sharing that best practice. And that's the sort of process and products that we would like to make sure that assist as we enter modernization. Getting to Delia's question, um, that we're incorporating those, and the tools that DSPO provides are enabling you to use those best practices and facilitate that communication. So to go briefly just address the rest of her question, we DSPO conducted a study several years ago collecting requirements for assist. Those have now been mapped along with current capabilities into requirements. That was part of the base year of the contract, which we recently completed for assist modernization and sustainment. We're now entering an agile development phase, and as we begin to complete sprints, we will be requesting user feedback, and so there will be opportunities um, for input from our users. So I have one more question for the executives. Uh, so as we've seen a lot of turnover throughout the defense standardization program over the past couple of years, from leadership down to individual activities. What tools or actions are needed to continue to build and maintain a standard savvy workforce?
Hey, this is Miles Miyamasu. I don't know at the higher levels what kinds of options may exist. I think at the more foundational and potentially from a across the service within the department, a way might be some kind of credential system, maybe partnering with someone like DAU, who has, I guess, a repository of courses that, without having to spend more money per se, to establish some kind of credential that, once someone takes these courses, they would have that certificate of sorts. And then from a workforce identification, and to the extent that we could use it to help us manage at the lower level, maybe that is something that we could use to identify experts or those that have keen interest in working in the standardization arena. Uh, I have to be honest, I'm not sure about at the higher levels and other mechanics that we might be able to uh, use or create, but just from a perspective at the baseline or at the foundation level, that could be something that we may want to consider over.
So I'll just to augment that a bit. I think from a hiring and retention problems are kind of ubiquitous now across a lot of sectors, not just the Navy, DoD, Air Force, Army. Um, we're seeing that everywhere. And I think there's a piece of this that's about training, which Miles just talked about. Uh, and maybe that's something that this body takes up. How do you get intentional about the training on this front? And you may already be doing several things in that particular arena, but I think that is key. Um, I'll subtly go back to the work environment. If you want to retain folks, you got to have a great work environment. It needs to be the best place to work. It needs to be the place that everybody aspires to and wants to be a part of. And I really think sometimes we underestimate the importance of that in in both attracting talent and then getting talent to stay. Someone told me this past weekend, if you outgive somebody's expectations, you'll almost certainly garner their full attention. And and I think that's true in these cases, especially when we're trying to convince folks that they can have a great career with whichever service they're a part of in this particular arena. Um, I just think there's a lot to that, and it gets into this whole notion of serving those employees well, so they know that we care about their aspirations, their goals, their desires. That's what we're about. I think when we do those things well, people say, "I want to continue to work in this environment," and I think that underlies kind of any particular area that we're playing in. Over.
So, in addition to just training and education and encouraging positive and strength, best behavior, I love your comments. There is a leadership component, Miles, that you mentioned, like, what can headquarters do in addition? I think there's recognition of the importance of the program, the importance of the funding that we're applying, the importance of our engagement. Um, but where it really, I think, hits home is when you apply it. So when we have an application of an open system architecture, or a digital data standard, or a microelectronics, zero trust standard. That's when we give those applications visibility, we're giving opportunities for our workforce to kind of get ownership of the technology, the standards, and get visibility, I think, as well. So those would be, I think you've hit on all the, we've touched on all the key points of how to keep and maintain and grow our workforce. But we're definitely in competition for our workforce, and we have to make standards as exciting as possible.
No, thank you, all of you, to all of our standardization executives, both online and here in person, um, for taking the time out of your busy schedules, and for your insight and perspective.